Welcome, everyone, to Aggressive Negotiations, a Star Wars podcast, but not your average Star Wars podcast, as we're going to touch on some things that you always wish people would about Star Wars, but maybe never had until the Jedi Masters showed up. And John, I have another important question for you this week.
Ooh, I look forward to hearing it. What's your question?
Well, this week, we were kind of ruminating, and my question became, Star Wars and friendship, Poe and Finn, are they really the first true, real, let's say, bromance on Star Wars? Like, the really first true friends that, they're not people that have to hang out, they're not master and apprentice, any of that. Are they really the first true, real friends we've seen in Star Wars?
That is a really interesting question. And I'm going to, I'm going to come right out of the gate and say yes. Specifically because I think you hit on it. There's nothing forcing them to be friends. They become friends through circumstance, but their plot lines don't rely on each other in any way. Poe, after the crash, spoilers, in Episode 7, they go their separate ways, and they come back together, and they have a reunion and everything, but Finn's fate isn't determined by Poe, and Poe's fate isn't determined by Finn. And I think that truly what sets it apart, and I want to see what you think about this. I think what truly sets it apart is that these are friends, and this again ties into your point about, the type of relationship. They're equals. With Luke and Han, there's the naive young boy looking up to the older brother figure. And with Anakin and Obi-Wan, there's the student looking up to the teacher. With Poe and Finn, you've got two people who are on equal footing, who are just decent people who happen to run across each other.
I think we're just on to something here, because it just struck me the other day as we were kind of talking about what we wanted to discuss on the show, and the idea of friendship came up, and Poe and Finn's friendship, and I thought to myself how much I really liked seeing that. Male friendship in shows these days and movies is, it's either funny or goofy or whatever, but these two guys just kind of coming together, a friendship that's kind of born of the adversity they face together, and then the way they come back together, and they're so excited to see each other again, like, dude, you're alive, I can't believe it. It's
right. It's
such a wonderful thing to be able to see that kind of kinship between two guys, and it's okay for it to not be something else other than just two gentlemen that are brought together and form a real friendship. And I think it's interesting that in Star Wars, for all that we have seen, that's really not something that we have explored all that often. So I'm really excited, I think, for the next few films, especially when I think of Episode 8 and where they'd go. It seems like Poe and Finn are probably going to be together a lot more in that film.
Probably so. And there's no, I think you're right. There's no subtext to this friendship. They're like a Frodo and Sam sort of friendship. And it has bothered me that people have tried to assign an imaginary subtext the way that they did with Frodo and Sam. Where people there almost seems to be this inability in our society to accept the idea that two guys can just be friends and express affection for each other and not have anything else beyond, I feel like the way people have reacted to the Finn and Poe friendship has exposed that there is still this underlying rejection of the idea that just two normal guys can be openly affectionate with each other with absolutely no other meaning to it.
I think it is really important because, and it's sad that in our culture today that bromanship, and bromance is, and that's, I kind of think of great shows like How I Met Your Mother, where there are these guys that are so close, they're great friends, they can, give each other a hug, they can be there for them when life sucks, and they're the person who's, the idea of that band of brothers, and I feel like that's kind of what Poe and Finn are going to be for one another, is they're going to have that brotherhood that comes with being forged in war and experiences that truly bind you together in a way that is just as powerful as the Force, But this is just, it's not the Force bringing, well, maybe it is the Force bringing them together, but you never know. But the Force that's also binding them together is just as strong. And I think that's an important thing in our culture to not lose, that it's okay for two guys to just be good friends. And like you said, to openly be able to give one another a hug or, to be like, I love you, man, which, think of the great Paul Rudd film, I love you, man. It's okay to be a dude and say to another dude, man, I love you, appreciate you, there's nothing wrong with that. Let's stop making it so awkward for guys to share their emotions when sometimes it can already be hard enough for us to do that.
Exactly. You're exactly right. You've actually reminded me of a memory that's always bothered me, where it was actually my brother, where I was saying goodbye to him one time. It was many, many years ago. He was living one place. I was living the other. I wasn't going to see him for a while. So we gave each other, my brother and I have always been very openly affectionate with each other. And we gave each other the big bear hug and the kiss on the cheek sort of thing. We've always been very demonstrative. And he was living in an apartment complex, and we actually heard this guy 3 balconies up or whatever, make this we couldn't hear what he said, but he obviously made a comment. We heard his friends, sort of snickering about what he said, and just this idea that people are it's such a foreign concept to people. That moment where Poe and Finn run up to each other and give each other the big hug. What is it about us as a culture that needs to sexualize every interaction, while at the same time, it would be very easy to sort of carry it into Rey's hug of Finn when she realizes he's the one that led the pursuit, to come and rescue her. What is it that is so fundamentally off-putting about the idea that two guys can just be really good friends? And I think that's at the core of the Poe and Finn friendship.
It's funny you mentioned that, the idea of that both of them, they see each other and they have that kind of aha moment that they're both alive, and they run to give each other a hug. And it's almost kind of like they're making sure that person's not a mirage. And that idea, I have friends like that, I live here in the Northwest now, and all of my friends, for the most part, I left them back in Dallas. So when I go back home and I see certain guy friends of mine, I bear hug them, some of them are bigger than I am, so I get picked up, and kissed on the cheek and that kind of, that's just who we are. We're close, we're brothers, we're friends, and two, for me with those friends, our faith also binds us as well. So we truly have a brotherhood goes beyond ever having to have been a part of each other's families. We are a part of each other's families for all intents and purposes. So, there is that thing that is bringing that greater force for us that's bringing us together. And I remember when we first saw it, and we were texting back and forth because we talk all the time. And of course it's Star Wars, so we're definitely talking about it. And we were kind of having some hard times with the Finn character at the very beginning. But now that we've gotten to this point, I really like Finn, and I love his relationship that he is able to have with all of these people around him. And when you think about this, how special is it that Finn was born and raised his entire life, because he was stolen as a child, to basically be a Hitler youth.
Yeah.
And yet this guy has such a loving connection, a servant's connection to everybody around him, wanting to help them, wanting to care for them, wanting to make sure they're okay. He does that with Rey, and he does that with Poe.
Oh, that's true.
Which is really cool. This guy is the kind of person that you want to be your friend, because he's loyal and true, and he's right there for you. And, you see the same thing with Poe. Poe immediately realizes Finn's not quite telling the truth, and he realizes what the truth is. You just need a pilot. Right. But no, we're going to do this. He puts himself into that position and is like, okay, this guy wants out. I want out. Well, heck, let's join forces. Right.
Well, and there's, but see that there's also with Poe, he doesn't hold it. speaking to the basic decency of Poe as a human being, he doesn't hold it against Finn that Finn's ulterior motive at first is simply to escape. He's able to recognize it and say, that's okay. You don't need to lie to me. You need me for something. I'm willing to do that because there's that whole mutual benefit angle to us. And that's while we're sitting here talking about it, like, I think it speaks to a fundamental difference that was difficult for longtime fans like us to plug into with Force Awakens, in that the friendships aren't necessary for the characters to survive. Like with Lucas, everything was story, everything served story, including the relationships. Whereas with this, and I think Finn and Poe are the best example of a relationship in the film that doesn't rely, to drive the plot. I mean, yes, they meet together, they both escape. I'm setting that aside, that their friendship isn't something that is necessary as a driver. And I also think, though, of how much it stands out where Lando and Han, like Lando gives Han a hug when he first sees him at Cloud City, but that hug in and of itself has an ulterior motive. And so, like, I'm comparing and contrasting now. Like, Han gives Luke a hug, but it's at the end of Return of the Jedi. Is that the only time Han and Luke hug?
They side hug when Han comes in, after they blow up the Death Star the first time, and they're all kind of walking
that's right. Yeah,
arm in
hug.
arm with Carrie in the middle,
Yeah.
So and that's something that I was thinking about as we were talking about this idea of friendship, that we would never get to see, now that Han is gone from this universe, the relationship between him and Luke. And did it ever evolve into something more than just... Because Han, I think, by the time it seems like Luke had progressed after Episode 6, he's almost uncomfortable with Luke because Luke has surpassed him now. Luke's the Jedi Master. Luke is this important person. Luke is this person that his wife sent their kid to, thinking they'd be able to fix him,
Right.
Han feels kind of left out of it all, and it seems like it kind of almost damaged that friendship. And as I'm thinking back, one of the few times we've ever seen friendship, and I do mean just actual friendship, seems to be in the Clone Wars series. And I'm thinking of Ahsoka and Plo Koon, and I'm also thinking of Ahsoka and Barriss before she goes off the rails.
Well, see, I'd say Ahsoka and Barriss, yes, but with Ahsoka and Plo, there's still that sort of... Plo was the one that found her, that brought her into the Order. So there's still a little tinge of that owing sort of feel to the friendship, where it's like, I owe you something, you changed something. Like, that I don't think is
maybe
there.
More fatherly almost. Yeah.
Right. But there's also, or maybe an uncle, since he wasn't actually her teacher.
That's true.
But I think you hit on something that I really hope they touch on in the books, although I have no faith at all that Chuck Wendig will do this. But in his books, I would love to see, or even if it's not in his books, I would love to see the moment where Kylo breaks off and joins the First Order. I want to see, did that damage Han's relationship with Luke? Did Han stop talking to Luke? Because obviously Kylo's problems caused problems for all three of them. Luke's attempt to reestablish the Jedi Order falls through because of Kylo. Kylo breaks his mother's heart. Kylo breaks his father's heart. And obviously their entire relationship, the Trinity that forms through those original three movies, has fallen apart. And would it have been a mark of a stronger or even healthier friendship? Like, did Han in some way hold Luke responsible? Did Luke in some way disconnect from Han because he felt he'd failed? I want that explored. I really want to find out what happened to their relationship when Kylo turned. And, speaking to the idea of friendship, like, I ask myself, like, if I gave my kid over to somebody to, like, watch over them and my kid turns out to be an a-hole by the end of it, what would that do to my friendship that person.
Well, and you think about that, there's two sides to that whole thing, because Kylo is also responsible for destroying what Luke was building too. So it's this whole big, huge mess that gets created. And I like the way that you asked the question, because I do think that there is a hint of how Han felt about everything. And we get that when he says, those who knew him best. Han doesn't seem to be saying that I'm one of those people. It almost feels more like it's coming from what Leia has told him, not what Luke had told him, because it doesn't seem like him and Luke were doing much talking. And that's just speculation, but that's kind of the subtext that I'm picking up, is Harrison Ford is playing his heart out with those lines there. And you can see the pain on his face. And maybe it is because he did feel like not only did he lose a son, but maybe he did feel like he also lost a friend.
Maybe at some point, Han, being hot-headed, said something to Luke about what had happened. And that damaged everything.
Yeah, you could see that happening too, especially with as frustrated as it seems like everybody was with the situation. So, it'll be interesting to see what happens in all of that, and if they explore that friendship. And I'm definitely looking forward to seeing the Poe and Finn relationship move forward.
Here's the question with Poe and Finn is, how do you see it developing? Do you see, because the thing is, with both Empire Strikes Back and Attack of the Clones, we see the friendship, quote unquote. Now, granted, we've talked about the different nature of it, but Han and Luke split. Anakin and Obi-Wan are separated through the great majority of Attack of the Clones. Do you think we see, is it possible that they'll head fake us and go, in your dream scenario for Episode 8, do you see Finn and Poe working together while Rey is away, or going, however that ties in, maybe they have to go out and warn her about something or something like that? Or do you see it going as more of a split apart, come together at the end, the way The Empire Strikes Back works?
That's been kind of my thought of what would happen, that it would be more of a split, that Poe and Finn would be on a mission for General Leia as Rey is training. And somehow, the Bermuda Triangle of Star Wars will hit at the end, where they somehow kind of will come all together, because, it seems like Rey is going to be training. But exactly what everybody else is going to be doing that was set up in this movie, it seems like there's going to be a lot of setup for the different sides. The First Order is reeling from losing a huge base and a lot of people and a lot of ships. The Resistance is feeling that same thing. And I'm kind of guessing, and this is where I could see Poe and Finn being on maybe some sort of military diplomatic mission with Leia, who's trying to gather, more systems to their cause, basically. Hey, they just destroyed the Republic. They're coming after the rest of the galaxy next. You're our only hope. And yeah, I do see it kind of being split, and that's what will give us more of those two characters working together, maybe in concert with Leia, and then have Rey and Ren in different respective training montages.
Yeah, a Rocky IV type montage.
Well, exactly. I'm hoping that they're chasing some kind of intergalactic chickens.
Snartle piffers.
Yeah. Well, they're not going to be chasing, Hapabors, so that doesn't take very long.
Now, it's so interesting though, because we're talking about Poe and Finn, but there is a friendship between Rey and Finn as well, which you touched on. But do you think that is a friendship, or do you think that is a friendship with sort of other overtones to it?
Now, yeah, as we talked about earlier, not wanting to kind of over-sexualize things, I do think that there is that thing that we got in the original trilogy where there's that subtle romantic undertone of the way that Finn feels about Rey. Whether or not she reciprocates that is going to be different. And I don't think they're going to get much chance for that to grow in this next film, just because I think they're going to be respectively in different parts of the galaxy doing different things.
Yeah.
There's a really cool thing that I'd almost like to see where this part of the saga doesn't involve romances, really. That it just really involves the idea of trying to set the galaxy right for once.
Basically, that everybody is committed more to a higher ideal rather than personal relationships.
Yeah, and not that personal relationships are a bad thing, because I think that the Jedi got into a really bad way with doing that in the prequel era and beforehand. But I think it would be kind of interesting, because that's not a realm that we've gone to in Star Wars. So having this more focused on friendships and that type of relationship might be interesting. But that all said, I think that Finn and Rey have a good chance of having some kind of romance, even if it's just unrequited on Finn's part.
Right. Well, I mean, he does have that line where he says, you looked at me the way nobody else has. But maybe that in and of itself will speak to the idea that, like, his relationship evolves or changes from sort of like that immediate puppy love reaction that somebody who, like you said, he's been brainwashed his whole life. Like he's just never had anybody treat him like a decent person or like a person before, instead of, a designation. And so maybe that speaks, to his relationship with Rey remaining friendship, because he'll have the maturity to say, oh, well, I don't default love this person because it's just somebody who's a decent person like I am. And, and we'll just be friends. And and there's nothing wrong with that sort of thing. Yeah. But I mean, in terms of Poe and Finn, Poe doesn't get a whole lot of time outside of a ship in this.
No.
in this movie. So what is it, do you think that, I mean, once we get past the whole thing where they jump in the ship together, what is it that makes their friendship resonate so much? That, we have that scene where they run together, where they're reunited, but what is it that just feels so authentic to you? What is it that makes that relationship feel so authentic?
I think it's the way that those two actors have a chemistry together. And there's something about the way that they're interacting with each other from the very beginning. And they're almost kind of like that funny odd couple. They're already fighting about, going back to Jakku, and Finn doesn't want to go back to Jakku, and Poe is like, no, we're going back to get my BB-8 unit. And Finn's like, I don't care what color it is. I mean, the banter and everything there, and the way that the actors are selling that is coming across. And I think that that's the thing that really worked to sell the friendship and to make it seem so real, was the way that those two actors connected. And I felt like those two actors connected behind screen, off screen, as just people, and that translated to the screen. And I don't know if, Oscar and John spent some time together before they were filming, getting to know each other and those kind of things, and they just kind of hit it off or whatnot. Maybe they hate each other and they're just amazing actors, but I don't think that's the case. I think there's just, this whole cast seems to have a great chemistry with each other.
That'd be so devastating to me to find out, like, they didn't get along off screen or something. Like, don't ever leak that report.
Yeah,
anybody,
I don't want to know,
because that would just break my heart. Because I think you're right. I think that it does transcend anything having to do with the script or anything at all. Is just the fact that these two guys, whether it's just acting or real life, exude this chemistry. When, like, you can tell when two friends are hanging out that they're friends. Like, there's something just different about the way that they, carry themselves and the way that they interact with each other. I think you're right. I think that it is something that the actors bring that we just sort of like innately respond to.
John, our first issue where we were talking about the small moments, and I mentioned the thing about Obi-Wan with the Boga. And what I really thought was interesting and kind of really showed me how cool of a guy Poe is when he realizes his buddy BB-8 is still alive.
You're right.
And the affection that he has for his droid in the same way, we haven't seen a ton of other people have, except for really Anakin, where he's just so close to R2. That's the relationship I felt between Poe and BB-8, is that same thing we had with Anakin and R2. And the way that Poe is interacting with BB-8, and the way that, BB-8 obviously tells him, hey, Finn completed your mission, and then that whole conversation they have, everything there is working together to show you what an incredible, honestly, human being Poe is, and how lovingly open he is to people, and even inanimate objects like a droid. Right. That this guy is just somebody who seems built to want to connect with people, no matter who they are. And I think that's a really cool thing. And then you put on what we talked about with Finn, where Finn seems to be the guy who wants to be there for people and be loyal to them and care about them and help them, even though all of his training has told him not to. Especially when we talked about the Before the Awakening book on the 602 Club, and how that was, Finn was the guy who was always helping the other soldiers who were run down, and weren't quite keeping up.
That's a really good point. Yeah, that's a really good point, because he does have that sort of innately about him, and maybe that is in and of itself something that that we respond to as an audience, is just the idea that both of these characters, like you said about Poe, like there's just something innately compassionate about them, that they're like, even though they're in these situations involving war and killing and death, there's something inside both of them that is genuine and compassionate that makes them better human beings.
And I think that's something that's so cool too. When we talk about manhood, what it means to be a good man, I think both of these men are representations of what it means to be a good man. Because both of these guys are so self-sacrificial towards others. And what better representation of what it means to be a real man than being somebody who's willing to lay their life on the line for somebody they just met. Finn feels that way about Rey. He's willing to try and save Poe from a burning, TIE fighter.
Yeah.
Poe obviously is the guy who is willing to put his whole life on the line to find Luke Skywalker and do whatever it takes to help the Resistance. He left, as we again learned in Before the Awakening book, he left the New Republic to join the Resistance because he saw that they weren't taking the First Order seriously. So both of these men are wonderful examples of what real men are supposed to be, which is so interesting. Think about this, or the friendship we were talking about with Luke and Han. Both of those men seem to kind of abandon things when things got rough.
Yeah, that's true.
And they're the older men. And now Luke's story still is to be told, what he was doing. But at least at this point, both of those guys kind of run and do other things when the going gets tough. Finn and Poe right now are like Han and Luke used to be.
That's a really good point, because no matter how justified it might be, and we talked about this on 602 previously too, but like no matter how justified they are, Han and Luke do abdicate their role in the world, in society, and maybe that in and of itself, maybe that likeness between Luke and Han made their friendship dysfunctional after a certain point, and that is the true contrast with Finn and Poe, is that they don't have that about them. You touched on it. Finn runs to the burning TIE fighter to try to save Poe just because it's the right thing to do at that point. Like, he's already gotten what he wants. He's gotten out of the ship. He's gotten away. He actually has no reason to run over to Poe to make sure he's all right. He has every reason just to go away and be done. So maybe that is in and of itself like the fundamental difference.
It reminds me of a couple of things. It reminds me of the great trailer for Batman v Superman, where Batman is, Bruce Wayne is standing there as the building is coming down in Metropolis, and he starts running towards danger. That's one of those pictures of what a real man does. And then I was thinking about Assault 13 Hours and the way those men are just chomping at the bit to go save the ambassador there in Benghazi. And they finally just disobey orders and go do it because they know it's the right thing to do. They run towards danger because that's what real men do.
Yeah.
And I think that's an interesting thing as we're looking at this. And I love that Star Wars can make us think about something like friendship and manhood and really important topics for our day and age, and just how important it is. And I think even giving us something that's worth looking up to. And that's really, really cool.
I got nothing to add to that. Yeah.
Well, John, before we let everybody go then, because, I would love to hear what people have to say about friendship. You can check us out at aggressivenegotiations.squarespace.com on our website. You can also find us on Facebook under Aggressive Negotiations. We're on Twitter at The Jedi Masters, so you can ask us any question there. And, of course, you could email us at aggressivenegotiations@gmail.com because we would love to hear from you, the listener, about what you think about. Maybe there were some friendships that we missed, and we're going to have to come back and do another show about friendship that we missed. And maybe we can even talk about female friendships that we may have missed and talk on that aspect. That'd be great. So, please, we're new at this as to doing this show, and we want to make sure that we're interacting with you guys because that's why we're having a good time talking about Star Wars stuff. Hopefully you'll having a good time listening to us talk about Star Wars stuff.
Yeah.
So, John, that's where we are online as the show. But I know that there's plenty of other things that you're doing online, so make sure you let everybody know where they can find you, your other projects online, and your other podcasts as well.
Well, right now you can find me on Trek FM as part of a podcast called Commentary Trek Stars, where we examine the non-Star Trek work of Star Trek creators. You can find me on another podcast called Wars with Nerds. And if you're looking for me, look for me on Twitter under Kessel Junkie. But that's pretty much where you're going to find me. So where can they find you, Matt?
Well, John, I am also like you. I do a few shows there on the Trek.fm network. You can find me on The Orb with Christopher Jones, where we're talking exclusively about Deep Space Nine. It's a lot of fun. Check that out. I also do Literary Treks with a guy named Dan Gunther, and we talk about the books and the comics of Star Trek. We also interview the authors. I do another show there called The 602 Club, and that's our general geek show. We talk about all things geeky, anything from Star Wars to Bond, Marvel, DC books. It goes on and on and on.
Yeah, the 602 Club is a great nexus on Trek FM for people to meet and talk about things.
It is. So be sure to join us there. And then you can also find me on Twitter at MattRushing02. Well, John, it's been great talking about friendship, but I think it's time to close negotiations.
Matthew, negotiations are closed.